every time she did something her mother disagreed with, her mother threatened to send her down to her redneck sister and brother-in-law as punishment. Now that threat had become a reality, and looking around, it certainly did seem like a punishment. It seemed like hell. She had no reception on her cell phone. Her aunt and uncle had an old rotary phone, a television on the floor with a dial on it, and literally everything was floral. She couldn't live here. She just couldn't. After a few silent minutes, Rosie's mother and aunt came into the kitchen. To Rosie's surprise, it looked like her mother might have been crying. Maybe Rosie's aunt had said no. That was the only reason Rosie could think of for her mother's emotion. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her mother cry. "You're going to stay with your Aunt Mary and your Uncle Joe for a while," her mother said, looking past her and out to the Lincoln Navigator where Rosie's stepfather waited, refusing to come inside. "No," Rosie said. "No, Mom, you can't! Please!" She stood up, but didn't advance toward her mother, afraid that if she did, she would throw her arms around her and refuse to let go. "This is what's best," her mother replied. Still, she didn't look at Rosie. "I love you." "No, you don't!" Rosie cried, tears streaming down her own face now. "No, you don't! If you loved me, you wouldn't make me stay here!" Her mother made toward the door, and Rosie lunged for her, unable to stop herself. Her uncle caught her by the shoulders and kept her in place as she screamed for her mother not to leave her. Rosie collapsed onto her uncle, crying loudly, even as she heard the car pull away from the house, even as it rolled out of sight and back toward the life she knew she was losing. Chapter 1. Rosie. Rosie Reynolds loved Texas in November. In fact, she loved Texas all of the time, a feeling that was practically required to be a citizen of the state. Still, there was just something about Texas in November that made her especially happy. She thought probably it was because by this time in the year, all the tourists had gone, packed up their rented minivans with their hordes of screaming children, and hightailed it out of Turtle Lake for the season. The only sounds she could hear this morning were coming from the beehive in her yard, her little darlings buzzing about as she walked around the hives, preparing for the final honey harvest before winter. This weekend would be one of her last trips to the farmer's market in Austin, where her honey was popular with the locals. "Good morning," Rosie said as she walked. Now that it was cooler outside, she didn't mind wearing her keeper's getup so much. When it was 99 degrees in July, she often felt like her face was melting beneath the veiled hat. I hear ya," Rosie grumbled to them. She walked away from her bees and disrobed from the suit. The Corgis crammed in closer to her, sniffing the pockets of her frayed jean shorts. "Here," she said to them, handing them each a bone-shaped treat. "Now quit yapping and let's get to the cove." Corgi Cove, often referred to as just the Cove, was an elegantly situated 3-story home on Turtle Lake, just about an hour outside of Austin. For the last 20 years, it had belonged to her Aunt Mary and Uncle Joe. They'd turned it into a once popular bed and breakfast, but before that, it had been many things. It was first a family home, built during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. It served that purpose for several decades before it was sold off to a former schoolmarm in the 1950s who wanted to open a sanctuary for wayward teenage girls. The Stillwell House for Girls stayed open until the 1980s, when its owner died and the house fell into the hands of distant relatives from the East Coast who wanted nothing to do with it. They kept up with the care from far away until it could be sold. It changed hands a few times, including during the 1990s, when its new owner thought she could run her Mary Kay empire.